It was a conversation with an extremely unfortunate and hyperbolic twist in terms of the remarks made by Ambassador Huckabee. And it obliged the nations that responded, the Arab League, to respond as they did. But let's be realistic about it. It is largely performative. They understand this does not represent U.S. policy, doesn't represent Donald Trump's policy.
Hello and welcome to the Middle East Report, your one-stop shop for all the news coming out of the Middle East, and I'm your host, Ali Raza Manji. Now, the Middle East has been set alight by comments made by the US Ambassador to Israel, Mike Huckabee, in an interview with the conservative commentator Tucker Carlson. He says, in no uncertain terms, that due to biblical pretense, Israel has the right to take the majority of the Middle East, and what it is doing is acting in accordance with the Bible. Now, that naturally angered many Arab countries in the region. So let's speak to David Satterfield, who is an American ambassador formerly to Turkey, Lebanon, a former US Assistant Secretary of State for Near Eastern Affairs, and of course, most recently, the Special Envoy to the Middle East. And he joins me now. Hello to you, David.
Hi, how are you?
Good, nice to have you with us. So when you speak to your colleagues in the region, what have they said about these comments basically made by Mike Huckabee?
Look, I think the regional governments involved understand the rather, shall we say, unique context for those comments. It was a conversation with an extremely unfortunate and hyperbolic twist in terms of the remarks made by Ambassador Huckabee. And it obliged the nations that responded, the Arab League, to respond as they did. But let's be realistic about it. It is largely performative. They understand this does not represent U.S. policy, doesn't represent Donald Trump's policies. It was regrettable because it's a diversion. The fact that you are asking me about this days after that interview took place indicates this has legs. But those legs come at a moment when the U.S. and the president have many other things of infinitely more importance to discuss, notably Iran, the meetings that are taking place right now and the decisions that will flow from those meetings, as well as the ongoing situation in Gaza. The last thing President Trump wants or needs is an unnecessary diversion, distraction, or an increase in level of concern by critical Arab partners, notably but not exclusively in the Gulf.
Yeah, I mean, Saudi Arabia, the Arab League, as you mentioned, were very critical of these comments, and they are inflammatory. Why are they so inflammatory? I mean, is this, I guess what I'm asking you, is this an accepted view among some people in Washington, among some hawks in Washington, and people who hold that sort of foreign policy view?
I cannot comment on percentages of those who may hold those views, but I certainly do not believe in any sense the comment citing a biblical authorization for Israel to take lands between the Wadi of Egypt and the Euphrates represents the views of this president or any responsible members of his administration in Washington.
I mean, he said it would be okay to take it all. That is a pretty extraordinary statement.
Yeah, Ali Raza, look, yes, it's an extraordinary statement. It is not a statement that is consonant either with U.S. policy or with simple prudence. However inflammatory the remarks by the other party to this conversation, Tucker Carlson, were, and they were highly inflammatory, inciting, and an attempt to draw out for reasons of increased hits on websites and social media. There shouldn't have been a response of this kind. It was unfortunate. It does not represent policy, but I'll say again, let's all of us be grounded in reality. The sharp reaction of Arab states was almost entirely performative because it is expected of them to make a comment. The relationship with the U.S. goes on.
Fine. So let's talk about it a bit more specifically then. So the Israel-US relationship is in some ways interesting because it is incredibly close, militarily close. There's military aid. There's been tens of billions of dollars of military aid just during this Gaza conflict. Does this signify to you as it may do to other people, including Tucker Carlson, obviously holds his own views. But is there an inherent closeness, I suppose, in the US-Israel relationship, which is unlike other relationships it has?
It's an extraordinary relationship. It has been an extraordinary relationship, certainly since 1973, since the war then, and the extraordinary transformation in the U.S. military relationship with Israel that followed that. So what are we talking about now? 50 plus years of an exceptional relationship is based on a variety of political, frankly, social connectivities here that are viewed as making of Israel something that historically has been seen as quite unique. But whatever the continued uniqueness of that relationship is, and I don't challenge that fact in any way, look at the extraordinary relationships which the U.S. has built with countries in the Gulf, with Egypt continuing, as well as with Saudi Arabia. Those relationships are extremely important to the United States. I don't believe the U.S. has seen the relationship with Israel as a zero sum, Israel or the Arabs, critical Arab states, for many, many years now. And that's a very positive development, positive not just for the U.S., but really positive for Israel, which wants to be accepted as a state among the nations in the region and the world.
So that brings me sort of to my next question, because these comments naturally would be seen as damaging to America's diplomatic efforts abroad. They would signify a level of openness in some ways about something that people speculate this, and it may not be true, and it certainly potentially hasn't been true, but of American foreign policy leaning a certain way. So when it looks like conflicts like Iran and the way America is dealing with Iran, how can it be seen as an impartial arbiter of its own policy, I guess, is the question.
Because the source of the remarks is, I believe, understood by the Arab leadership, as it's understood broadly in Washington, to be something rather unique. It is not a comment which Jared Kushner or Steve Witkoff or the president or Marco Rubio would make.
So you're saying it's anathema and it's separate essentially to what the president's remarks are, the president's views. It's worth saying as well, when the president made his first foreign trip, he did not go to Israel. In the Middle East, he went to Saudi Arabia, I think, and Qatar and so on. And he had those extraordinary gifts that he was given, then including a plane, I believe. So let's turn then to Iran in this case. What we know is that as of today, the negotiations have changed. That the parties are now heading back to their sort of electoral masters, I guess, and trying to get an answer from where they stand and before technical negotiations take place. So can you walk us through where we are with the negotiations?
I'm going to give you perhaps a curious and very diplomatic response. I don't know.
Well, that
I don't know. And I would caution that very few do know. You've had a contradictory set of commentaries accompanying the last 12 hours or so during the course of the talks and immediately following. They were disappointing. They were positive. There was substantive progress. There are still major issues needing to be resolved. You're getting less than a uniform U.S. and non-U.S. set of commentary about this. But the basic question which I have, which I think all of us analytically have, is what does the president wish to achieve? One must assume that the de minimis goal here is a nuclear enrichment agreement which can be demonstrably, credibly, to a skeptical Congress and skeptical U.S. audience and regional audience, be seen as better than the JCPOA, which means that no sunset clauses, an end, at least in some fashion, to the present enrichment program, and accountability under sharper terms for enriched stockpiles and what the definition of unacceptably enriched uranium is. It's 3.6, is it 1.5, where does the level come? That the president would be able to say, these are binding IAEA, Grossi was present in the discussions, enforceable, intrusively monitorable and accountable provisions, and they go far beyond the JCPOA. That's the de minimis goal. Is Iran prepared to do it? Many of the commentaries coming out of Iran's senior leadership would suggest, in principle, yes. But in principle isn't good enough. You have to get to the details of a specific agreement. But then come the other questions. One of the critiques of the Trump 1 administration, when the JCPOA was withdrawn from, was where are the other issues here? Where are ballistic long-range missiles? The support for the three H's, Houthis, Hamas, and Hezbollah, the proxies. Where is that present here? Signals out of the White House would suggest that the missile and support for proxy issue is not the focus of these talks. It's nuclear. If it really is nuclear, and if Iran is willing to make, as it suggests, the necessary commitments here, then a deal is possible. But you've got an extraordinary accumulation of military hardware.
Yeah.
Just extraordinary. And I have to raise the question, is a deal on nuclear issues, however sound, however much an improvement over the JCPOA, enough for the president to confront the accusation that once again you backed down from your support for the demonstrators, retaliation for the massacres committed by the government of Iran's security forces? Where is the support for the proxies, and where are the missiles? Certainly Israel is very concerned about these issues.
Well, I was gonna bring it full circle a little bit and say in two final points to you. Do you really believe in this sense that President Trump, in these negotiation efforts that are going on, really wants some kind of a deal, whether it's a nuclear deal, whether it's a ballistic deal, whether it's a more regional security deal, whether it's all of the above? Does he want that kind of deal? That's my first point. And my second point, really, answering what you're saying about Israel and what it wants in the region, does this, because of said comments made by Mike Huckabee, does this almost become a test of American foreign policy in the region and whether it can reach results without a need of show of force?
I think the answer to your first question is the president does not want to be viewed as a loser. The president does not want to be viewed as someone who postured but then cannot back up his remarks, which is why I question whether a nuclear deal alone, without any of the other elements, proxy support, missiles, is enough to achieve that. Would he prefer a deal? Sure he would, because it is quite clear that even a minimal or so-called limited military action has very unlimited and potential consequences, the least likely of which is regime change. The second question you pose, which is the regional repercussions, the region doesn't want military action because of that uncertainty over what comes next, the mabad, the what after issue here. They would like to see a deal as well. Would they be happy with a firm deal on the nuclear issue? Of course they would, because I'm not sure they see any other actions by the U.S. as guaranteed to end the other threats posed by the regime.
David Satterfield, thanks for joining us.
Thank you.